So now we're going to make herbal oil and then salve. Okay? So super simple to make. And you know, there are a lot of salve companies because when you make a salve, you feel the very first one you make turns out so perfectly, and you're so excited about it that you think you're going to start a salve company. There's tons. This is actually done by one of my students. She has a beautiful little, and I just brought them as samples. You can try them and stuff. I'll pass them around. She makes all kinds of salves and she labels them beautifully. It's a really sweet one. And then this is one that I made just because I wanted I wanted like a vapor bomb. So this is a vapor bomb. You can smell it. It smells beautiful. Yeah. And so like this is just, you know, it took me 20 minutes to make. And you can make salves, and that's another thing I've sent to my family. Here's another salve, you know. This year I sent them birdhouses. It's true. I figured they have enough herbal stuff, but I probably put herbs in it, right? Was there any herbs in the birdhouse? There's some herbs in it, yeah. Oh, elderberry syrup. Oh, yeah, my vanilla extract. I was trying to be creative to my family. Okay, so the very first point, the very first step of making a good salve. So let me share this. Salves they're like an ointment, so they're called ointments. They're made always in a base of oil. It can be olive oil, coconut oil. It can be beef tallow, bear fat, grease. It's oil base. And actually the old ones, the old-fashioned ones were usually made in animal fat because of the minerals in them. So that's an option for those of you who go out and hunt. You can use the oil from your animals to make these salves. I prefer olive oil, of course, in case you wondered. But anyway, I just like the olive oil, and olive oil has a very long shelf life, and it's a medicine in itself. Plus, I'm Armenian, and Italian, so of course olive oil would be a first choice for us. So the very first step of making a salve is making a good oil. And if there's one oil that I would really encourage you to make this year, it's St. John's wort oil. So this oil is world famous. It is made with the St. John's wort that grows everywhere around here. We saw a fresh young plant, and we saw lots of old plants when we went on our plant walk. It is an invasive species, but it's also it's an incredible medicinal plant with a long history of being used as medicine. One of its medicinal properties is as trauma oil, as an herb that's used for any kind of nerve damage. So it's incredible for burns. I have so many stories I could tell you about burns that people have had, and myself. One time I went to move a log in my wood stove, and I rolled the log onto my finger, and I had a severe burn. It was, I burned off actually a part of the end of my finger, not very much, but end of it, and it was really painful. And I used honey is what I used in the beginning, honey with a little peppermint oil, just a tiny drop of peppermint oil and honey so it wouldn't get infected, and I kept it wrapped and changed the bandage for a few weeks. And then when it finally was unwrapped, I didn't have any feeling in my finger anymore because I damaged the nerve endings. So then I took St. John's wort oil and I applied it every day for weeks, probably months, until my fingers started to hurt. And then I knew the nerves were starting to come back. So I have complete use of that, but that's just one small story. So St. John's wort oil, but really what you do, how many of you have made St. John's wort oil here before? Yeah, a lot of you. So you go out and in the summer, before the buds are fully open, like they should just be opening. So a lot of people collect the flowers, and a lot of people collect them when they're way past. You have to get it when the buds are opening, and when you press the flower, your fingers are going to stain bright blood red. There's no question that it's ready. You press a few flowers and your fingers are blood red, like the color of your t-shirt. That's what color it should be. So you collect those fresh flowers. It does work with dried. I've done it with dried, but it's better with the fresh. You collect the fresh flowers, and then you cover them with about an inch of olive oil. And you place this in the hot sunlight. So we know hot sun makes oil go rancid. But never have I made herbal oils when the herb is still in the oil. I've never had an herb go rancid. Once I strain it, and if I put it back out in the hot sun, the oil go rancid. Once I strain it and put it back out in the sun, even olive oil will go rancid after a while. There's some chemical thing that's going on where the plant will go rancid. So put it in the hot sun and let it sit for about, 2 or 3 weeks. It'll start turning red overnight, actually. But then this is just beautiful oil. So you make oil. If you don't have St. John's wort and you have other herbs that you want to make into your oil, you can take any herb and you can do the same method. You just put your herbs. Most herbs, so we were saying use St. John's wort fresh. Most herbs, when I'm making an herbal oil, unless you're a really good medicine maker, you've been doing it a long time, I would say use dry herbs or use dry wilted herbs first. And that's because herb, oil, and water do not mix. It makes rot, right? And it will grow mold. So if I want to make a good fresh comfrey is full of water. It's just water rich, right? And if I put that in my oil, it's going to get funky. So if I dry wilt it, remember what dry wilting is? It's like you've forgotten it, right? So if I put that in there, it's going to not rot. It'll be better. And again, the more surface area of the plant that's exposed to the menstruum or the solvent, the better it is. So you want to chop it up really fine. This I've already made. I made this because I wanted to make a salve for you, and then pass it around for you to have. And we might even have enough for people to take with them, actually. Anyway, so this salve is made. This is comfrey, yarrow, calendula. And each one of those herbs are incredible for wound healing. And then if I added the St. John's wort, you'd have one of the best salves that you could possibly get. It's a very famous recipe called burn salve, but it's really an all-purpose salve. The St. John's wort, comfrey, calendula, and yarrow. That recipe is just an amazing salve. And for burns and for wounds and for cuts. But I started to say this is important. So salves are in an oil base, and like if you have a really bad infection, oil can seal in infection, right? Or if you have, a lot of times people will use oil-based products on poison ivy or poison oak. And I usually say, some people it works for, but I usually do not put oil on poison ivy or poison oak because it's spread by oil. So I usually use an astringent, like a liniment or something, and I save the salve till when the poison oak is no longer spreadable and the skin is really irritable, and then I put a salve on. Yeah, exactly. A plantain or a liniment or a tincture, something, or clay, something that dries or draws it, rather than something that might spread it. And definitely, like if you have an active infection, like pus or ooze in there, and you put a salve on it, salve is like a happy medium for bacteria to grow in, right? So you can seal in that infection. So disinfect it with a good liniment or a tincture or yarrow, and then after the infection is not active, then you can use the salves. The salves are good for soothing and healing. So like diaper rashes and burns and owies and, bites and irritated skin. I know you must all be getting tired. You want to get up and stretch? Shake your booties? You're not getting tired? Oh, I am. No, go ahead, honey.
What do you think about adding heat to the oils and like the temperature top?
Yeah, thank you so much. So she's asking about heat because you can turn your oils really rancid quickly by heat. So when you do a stovetop method, so we love the solar methods. I love making solar oils. I learned that from my elder Juliet de Berkeley-Levy, who was one of my early teachers. And she would make everything in the sunlight. She'd put her oils in sandboxes, actually. And really, again, they never went rancid. But when you use a high heat, like on the stove, you can burn your oils really quickly. You go from a nice warm oil to frizzle and it's smoking, and then you've really wrecked it. You can't use that. You cannot reclaim a burnt oil. So a quick method is to do the stovetop method, right? And stovetop is using a double boiler and putting the same proportion, like you put your herb and then you cover it with about an ounce or an inch or two of oil, And when you're doing the solar method of this, you have to keep the oil above the herbs, or you're going to get oil, mold in your plant. It just will grow mold. So use those nice glass weights. They work really well, the fermented weights. But on the stove, you use a double boiler. So you are heating the water to just a nice low temperature. And the longer you let it sit, just on that low, 2 or 3 hours on a very low heat without letting it smoke or fry, then you're going to get a really good quality oil. This was done by the stovetop, and it's beautiful. It smells like herbs, looks like herbs. Yeah, it's really a beautiful, beautiful oil. It's nice.
Do you add anything to thicken the olive oil, or is it just olive oil?
Well, I just used olive oil, but you can mix your oils. I always say you can use any oils. We don't want to get prissy about it. Some people can't afford really good quality olive oil. I always say any oil but Wesson. Maybe that's being prissy. Wesson, no, don't make your salves with Wesson. But olive oil is a really high quality, and it's been used for making these salves. So the recipe is this: for every cup of liquid oil that you have, and this would be true of coconut oil as well, you add 1/4 cup of beeswax. 1/4 cup of beeswax. And beeswax is a medicine in itself. It's another product made by the amazing bees. I always say, there's no such thing as a master herbalist that's a person. You're always learning. There's so much to learn. But if you want to look at master herbalists, you look at bees, because they spend every day flitting around from flower to flower, and then they make amazing healing products. So we're going to add 1/4 of a cup of beeswax to a cup of oil. And all we're doing is we're just warming the oil enough that it warms the beeswax. So beeswax comes in big chunks, and you'll want to grate it. You don't want to put a big chunk like this in. I just brought it because it's so pretty. So I usually either grate it, or I buy it in pearls now because I've gotten lazy. You want to have it so that it melts quickly in the oil, because again, you don't want to overheat your oil. So I'm just going to warm this oil and add 1/4 cup of beeswax, and it's going to look like all of that you're seeing. You can also add essential oils. So like I brought some, I might add a little lavender for burns, right? Lavender is a really good oil for burns, or peppermint. Both of those are really good. Peppermint is interesting because if you have a bad burn and you add a little peppermint to honey, just enough, so peppermint, when you put that on the burn, cools it. So it takes the pain right away. But the secondary, so that's the first property that you feel, but peppermint is actually warming to the system. So it feels cooling because it's evaporating rapidly, but it actually is warming, so it draws healing energy to that wound. So it works actually really, really well. And then lavender is I call that a first aid in a bottle when you're using that essential oil. It's an oil when I travel, I take it with me, because if there's insect bites, we were somewhere and somebody got really bad insect bites, we just bring the lavender out and slather it on. It just takes the sting away. If you're feeling a little stressed, you just can rub a little bit on your forehead. It's a powerful nervine. It's an antimicrobial, antibacterial, and antiviral. First degree, really work incredible. So a really great herb to use when there's things like pandemics floating around. This information is so helpful, It makes you feel safe in an unsafe world. At least it makes me feel safe. And plus, I want to feel really safe in this world. I don't want to feel unsafe. So for me, it's lavender and peppermint. I don't use the guns, but I do use lavender. Lavender is my big gun.
Does the beeswax go old or bad?
No, beeswax will last for years and years and years. It does never go bad. Neither does honey. Okay, so let's make a salve really quickly.
On honey, did you know that honey has been found in Egyptian tombs?
Yes, that's right.
It's still good?
Can you hear what our dear friend is saying? So he's saying that honey has been found in the Egyptian tombs, and it's still good. Yeah, it lasts for really forever. Sometimes it crystallizes, and sometimes it dries up a little bit. The actual honey is still really good. I've been experimenting. We kept bees when I lived at our herbal retreat center, and so I put away some, and it's about 28 years old now, and still as good as a day. It's red maple honey, So it's this incredible honey.
I'm actually going to start experimenting with using honey to can meat.
Oh yeah, that'd be great. Yes.
I have honey that my grandma put up in 1880 and
Oh,
still there.
there you go. She beat me. She beat me by a few years. Yes, honey. Yes, honey.
I noticed on this eucalyptus salve, okay, so I have access to lots of eucalyptus, and how, like, can you just,
Use leaves? Yeah.
what do I use? What part?
Yeah. So you use the leaves, and what's higher concentration are the little nut balls that go with the eucalyptus, those seed pods. You can get, eucalyptus when you break the leaves. There's so many different eucalyptus, but if you have like the long variety, it's very strong, it's very potent. So you can chop that all up and you can make a good salve, just the way we talked about, either by solar method or by the double boiler. And you can get a pretty strong salve. You definitely are going to get a lot of the medicinal properties, but if you're making a vapor balm where you want, like a Vicks vapor balm, you want that really strong scent, adding a drop or two of eucalyptus oil is going to make it even stronger. So a beautiful way to do it is to put your whole eucalyptus leaves in, so you get the full spectrum of the plant, and then just add a drop or two of the leaf.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So I need my measuring cup. So I actually use a measuring cup when I'm figuring out the 1/4 cup to 1 cup, because what will happen is if you add a little too much beeswax, then you get a really hard salve. If you add a little too much, you get if you add not enough, you get a really soft salve. If you add, you know what I'm trying to say, right? So the amount of beeswax you add is really important. So one of the things that I always suggest doing is you add your 1/4 cup beeswax to your cup of oil. You warm it up. Do not pour it into your salve containers until you take a spoon it out, and put it in your refrigerator or freezer for like 5 minutes and test the consistency. Make sure it's the consistency that you want, because beeswax is an organic product made by bees. And every season, it might be a little harder or a little softer. So you want to make sure, and you may want a soft salve. You may want a salve for a baby's diaper rash, or for, really soothing the skin. You may want something soft, but you may live in a really hot climate and you don't want a soft salve because it's going to melt. So you're going to make it harder with that, right? And I always emphasize, test your salve before you pour it, because especially if you're pouring it, I do have enough containers. I think we can give you this little container. Because if you pour it into these little containers and it doesn't solidify, you have to clean them all out. And I learned that the hard way. I was used to have a little company called Country Comfort, which, believe it or not, is still out there, still making salves and lip balms and baby care products. But I finally measured. I used to just stick my finger in the wax in the oil, and when it came out to be like, Halloween candy, I went, aha, it's ready to pour. And one time, then when I started the company, I had to measure everything out using ingredients, using the measuring and the weighing. And so then I followed the weight in the measure without doing my finger test, and I poured 500 containers of salve to come in the next day, and every one of them was just swimming, and I had to clean them all out. So always use that little spoon test. It's really important. So I'm going to just measure this out. Oh, I forgot to show you how to make the spritzer. All right. Betty, you want to make the spritzer for me, honey? Just add some water. Add some water to this.
How much water?
Yeah, fill that water, fill it all the way up to the shoulder, and then just add some lavender oil to it. And then we'll pass it around. Oh, add enough lavender oil so it smells really good. So my sister's making that spritzer that I started to teach you how to make about an hour ago. So to make a spritzer, you fill the jar up. Now, if you want this to last for several weeks or something, you need to put a little something. You know how water goes funky if you just letting it sit out? So if I was making this to sell, or I'm making it as a gift, I would put in that little 2-ounce bottle, I would put about a teaspoon of gin or vodka. That preserves it. You just add a little bit. But because I'm going to pass this around, you can just cool yourself off and spray. And then what you do, because we didn't have our hydrocell here, so I couldn't make it for you, we're going to take a little lavender, and my sister's going to add a few drops to that. That's how you make it. That's simple. And then we put a lid on it. So it's distilled water. Even if you have good well water, I'd probably suggest if you're making this again to last for a while, use distilled water or a hydrocell. Add a little something to keep it, to preserve it, like a gin or a vodka. Here I would not use brandy because brandy has a flavor or a scent. Use something that doesn't. Make it smell nice and strong for them, Betty. Oh, that's really strong. The oil, essential oils will float on the top. So as this goes around, you just shake it. Thank you, honey. Put that on. Shake it, and then you just spritz your friend. Make sure you take your glasses off. Windshield wipers coming up. Yeah, you just squish it down. Put a lid on, shake it, and then spray me. Let me see. I need to be sprayed. So this is how we spray. Yes, spray me. I'm hot. So you do, it makes a good. Yeah, I need this. Oh yeah, perfect. Oh, it's so good. Oh, take your glasses off, Betty. No, feel good. She made it pretty super strong. So
You can really see it coming out of there. Yeah.
this is it. Now I can sell. Does anyone want to buy this for $15? How about go to a really fancy makeup place, and they'll be like a lot of money. That's basically it. That's how hydrocells. It's not even really a hydrocell. We call that a spritzer because the hydrocell is actually the distilled water from the plant. You could, absolutely, yes. You could be creative with this. Yes, absolutely, totally. And if you don't like that scent, I have other scents. How about peppermint? If we sprayed you with peppermint, you'd be, the whole room would get all excited.
And then how much vodka for the preservative?
Yeah, so this is a 2-ounce bottle. No more than a teaspoon is all you need. Just, if I was using a larger bottle, I'd put a little bit more. It's just a small amount. Otherwise, the water goes funky. Water sitting out on a counter for a long time doesn't last. So, oh no, I wasn't gonna. Who had this bowl? I didn't get around to making that. Okay, so we're gonna add our. This is what I. Oops, no. Okay, we're gonna add our oil. Okay, so we're gonna add 1 cup. Where's the cup? Oh, there's a half a cup. There's a cup.
Hey, you wore your glasses.
I know. Okay, and then we add a 1/4 cup of beeswax. These are the little beeswax pearls. And you can get all of these. By the way, you get the beeswax pearls and the containers and stuff. All of these are bought just online. I get most of them from Mountain Rose, and they actually donated all of this stuff for the class, which is pretty nice of them.
Wow.
So let's think about a 1/4 So 1/4 of a cup, and I'll test it. And then we just put it in here, and Betty's gonna warm this up for me.
So if your salve is starting to sweat, or do you not have enough beeswax maybe, or what causes
If it's
that?
sweating, if your salve is sweating,
My salve is
Spray it with the
sweating. It looks like a little seeds of water. I don't know.
spray it with lavender spritzer. So you're sweating. Maybe, I'm not sure why that would be, why your salve is sweating. Maybe too much. What's the
Maybe
urge?
I didn't put enough beeswax. Maybe it's pretty soft.
Okay, yeah. I try to make mine pretty firm, like you saw that mine was that. Yeah. So this would just take like 5 minutes. You'll stir it, and then I'll add a little essential oil. You don't have to add the essential oil, but I'll add a little maybe tea tree and maybe a little peppermint oil to it. We'll add. So I'm not adding these essential oils for scent. I'm adding them for their medicinal properties.
Wait.
Thank you, Betty. Where's that nice gentleman who helped us before?
I don't know, but I did it.
No doubt she did it.
So you want low heat? Let's see. Oh, I see.
Yeah, just low heat, enough to kind of get that going.
Is that about right?
That's perfect.
Should just keep it going.
Thank you, Betty.
I charge.
You'll get a salve. Okay. And so
We're
there,
just waiting for it to melt.
yeah. So I think we will definitely make sure that the recipes are online for you. There's, I just put a whole bunch of them in. I had the only thing that we really didn't make on here was the electuaries, which are the herbal powders. And I'll just share with you like what. So a lot of times you can use herbal powders. We were talking about the mushroom powders in the mushroom class, right? But it's, it's fun to be able to bring these medicinal plants into your home as food. So I'm always trying to incorporate them into kind of our daily rituals so that they really become a part of our life, which is how plants always were. And so one of the things that I do is I take herbal formulas, and they can be very medicinal. Again, if you have a chronic long-term illness, you can take your formula and you can make an electuary with it, so it's adding honey. Or if you don't use honey, you can use maple syrup or a rice syrup. So it doesn't have to be honey, but a sweetener, and you make it into a paste. And then I usually add something that makes it taste really good, like maybe carob powder or cacao powder. And you can even add like a little bit of essential oil, like a little orange oil, so it gives it just a little hint. And it makes it more like these herbal pastes, make it more like food, right? So you can just eat those herbal pastes off the spoon. They no longer taste awful and bitter and yucky. You can use them as instant tea. You can just take a little gob and put it into hot water, stir it around. The herbs will settle because they're not freeze-dried, they will settle. So you just kind of have to stir that tea a few times. You can also use them on toast or crackers. So there's lots of different ways that you can use them. But I was going to make that for you too. That's the only thing on here that tomorrow, yeah, we'll do an electuary, and everybody can try that. We did the oxymels. We didn't do the fire cider. So can I just tell you a little bit about fire cider? Yeah. So fire cider is, in truth, it's an oxymel. It's acidic. Yeah, we could call it a traditional oxymel. It's vinegar, honey, and herbs. It's a very, very famous formula. It was first made in my kitchen in 1981. We know that as a fact. It was a formula that I taught lots of people to make, and it was very popular because you don't have to be an herbalist. You can go to a grocery store and you get horseradish, ginger, garlic, and onion, and anything else you want to add, but that was the basic recipe. You put it in vinegar, so you were making a vinegar tincture, and then you added honey to it. It was really tasty. People liked it. It tastes good. It was hot and fiery. Not good for people, not good for people who don't need a lot of extra heat or don't like hot. But for those of us, is that good?
Well, I don't know, it's melted.
It's all melted, yes. So we have to turn the heat off, and then we're going to just put a little bit.
Yeah, we'll put that in that spoon, and then we'll put it in. Oh, you got it.
It's okay. You can put it in there next. Maybe put another spoon. I think that I put too much beeswax in, but that's all right. I'd rather have it be too hard. Okay, we'll just let that sit now for just a minute. Put my finger in there. See what I mean? I would just put my finger in there. See, does it turn out like Halloween candy? I'm going to let it sit because I would feel very foolish if my salve was not hard enough.
You only open snacks.
Yes, and then we could spill it. We could pour a little in there for them, and they can have a nice. Where could we put that though? Okay, maybe put this down. Yeah, this is real.
I was wondering if that split it.
Well, yes, but you should be able to put a lid on it without the moisture. I'm not really sure. So, and so I taught people, and other people taught people, and it started traveling around, and then you'd see it in different books and stuff. It was really exciting. It was like saying goodbye to a child who'd grown up and gone off in the world on their own, and it was really fun to see that recipe show up everywhere. And really, for about 40 years, it was shared in the herbal community. And then a young couple who had very good intentions, they saw the recipe and they decided they would start a little company, and people started buying their fire cider. They were really excited about it. And then they decided, hey, we could make a lot of money doing this. We're going to trademark the name. And they trademarked the name, and then they started telling other companies, very nice, they wrote really nice letters saying, this is our business now, and sorry, even though you've been making this for 30 years, you can't make this and sell it anymore. And the herbal community got really pissed about it. Really, like, wait a minute, this formula belongs to all of us. And so there were 3 herbalists and myself who decided we were going to fight it, right? And it wasn't really just about fire cider, but it was because there are hundreds of recipes that have been freely shared for hundreds of years. Another example I use is Four Thieves. Four Thieves is from the 1500s. So we've been making fire cider for 40 years, but people have been making Four Thieves vinegar for 500 years, and a company trademarked that too at the same time. Anyway, we ended up in federal court for seven or 9 days. We fought it all the way to federal court, and we won. Yeah, we won. It costed almost $1 million in lawyer fees, but we didn't pay it. We had these wonderful lawyers who stepped up and helped us. They didn't want to help us through the whole thing. It was kind of divided into two steps. Like, the first step was that the company sued these 3 herbalists $100,000. I mean, they were herbalists, making small products. They sued them because they were selling the product, or, Anyway, so the lawyers stepped on to help us with that first case, and then they were done. They said, we've done our community service. Okay, you girls are really great. We really love you. We love your fire cider. Bye-bye. We have work to do in our big law firm. But the judge said, no, you have to go all the way. And the judge asked them to do it, and they gratefully took it on. And then it took 5 years. It was 5 years and a long fight. And the only reason it was so important to us is that they call it a landmark case. So this is what the judge said. Because it wasn't just that fire cider was saved. It just meant so they called us a subgroup of people. We were a subgroup, herbalists are a subgroup of people. But even if you have a product that is known really well in a small subgroup of people, and you can prove that it's really well known, it cannot be trademarked in mainstream. So say a religious group, or a native group, or a farm group that they have a product that they make and it's very popular in their group, then you will have a good chance of standing up for that, because fire cider won. And we did write a really wonderful book called Fire Cider, by the way. It's a community effort. It's a great book on using fire cider. But I always laugh because, fire cider is just one of 100,000s of recipes that I've made and shared. It just always cracks me up that one, it wasn't even my favorite one, right? But that one was the one that kind of went off in the world and kind of took on its own life. And I'm always hesitant to say that I made it first, because I definitely did not make vinegar products first. That formula has been used before. Just the name, fire cider, wasn't used before that time. But I feel this way about all of our herbal remedies, is that they come through us, through our ancestors. They really belong to no one. They belong to everyone. They're meant to be passed on and shared. And that doesn't mean that you can't trademark something. I'm not against trademarks at all. If you invest a lot in something that you've done and it's originally yours, but those 2 young people knew that recipe wasn't theirs. So that was the thing. They made us mad. Anyway, on that note, let's see how our staff, I think it's good.
Rosemary?
Yeah, I think it's great. Yes.
So
You've been a very attentive student all day long.
I've been trying. I still hate work though.
That's good. Yes.
If you were to recommend one book to cover, let's say for example, there was no more internet, and you were limited in your community with people that had this knowledge, what if you were it? Is there one book you could recommend that would span the most important, both medicinal and wild edibles?
Well, I would say that those 2 books would be really different, really. The wild edibles, we had talked about those books earlier, and I wasn't even, there's some that are even better. I was just showing those because they were for this area. So let me think for a minute on that, because there are some really, really good herb books. I was talking to a woman earlier, and I was saying that I really love some of the old classics, like Back to Eden and the School of Natural Healing and stuff. They were written, buttons. They were written, in the early 1900s when, and the Modern Herbal by Maud Grieve. They were written at a time when everybody was using herbs, right? So they don't have fancy stories, and they don't have, the personal histories of people, which I love in the books. They're just, here's the recipe, and they use them for all kinds of serious illnesses because that's what they were using. So I do love those classics, and I believe people should have them on hand because they have really good information. But there are some wonderful herb books being written by young herbalists. I'm really impressed, actually, by the amount of herbs. So let me think about what book, if we were looking at one. But I did want to recommend, I don't usually self-promote, by the way, but my little book that I wrote for beginner herbalists. So this I wouldn't recommend for what you're asking, but if you're just starting your herbal journey, maybe beginner, early, intermediate, and you want to have a good safety net and you want to know how to make all these with really good recipes, I wrote this little book that's called Medicinal Herbs, A Beginner's Guide, and it's written for you. It's in depth enough. It gives you the really safe, good herbs and great recipes. So it's a really good book for those of you who say, I kind of want to do this. It sounds good, like to learn a little bit about that. That's helpful. So I have so many books on my bookshelf that I would recommend. But so there's Juliet Blankensport. So there's a herbalist who lives in Washington, I think. Her name is Rosalie de la Forest. Yeah, and she wrote it absolutely beautiful. She wrote it with her good friend Emily Hahn, I think. And it's called Wild Remedies. Yeah, is that it? Yeah, so that one does have the wild plants and then lots of great. She's an incredibly wonderful herbalist, and she does online classes. And she's in your neighborhood, Rosalie de la Forest. And then there's also an incredible herbalist named Juliet Blankenspore. So Blanken, Blanken, Ken, Spore, Spore, Blankenspore, Juliet Blankenspore. And hers is called The Healing Garden, if I'm remembering the title right. And it's another. Do any of you know that book? I think it's The Healing Garden, right? Yes, you might be able to help me because right now I'm just drawing. I'm thinking those two books I know are wonderful, and they just were published and they have lots of great information. So an overall general herbal that somebody who knows a lot could have this on hand. Can you think of one, honey?
I would say Michael Moore's Plants of the Rocky Mountain West.
Yeah,
That
so-
book has processes.
Yeah, so
Is that good for here though?
yes, it is, and it's so books by Michael Moore. He's passed away, but he was a wonderful herbalist, and he wrote books for the whole West Coast. But herbalists all across the country use his books, so those are really excellent. Yeah,
One of my favorites is the 10 essential herbs because it narrows it down to just 10,
yes,
and most of those are in your kitchen already.
yeah, that's beautiful. Who wrote that book, The 10 Essential
I
Herbs?
think it's Lolita Thomas.
Lily Thomas. no, I'm laughing. Lolita Thomas.
I think so.
Yeah, the 10
I brought it
essential
with
herbs.
me.
Oh,
It's
good.
one of my favorites.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah, so I think that's a really good point. Like you don't need to have an herbal repertoire or an apothecary with 50 herbs. Really, I always say 10 to 15 herbs, know them well, know their multi-uses, that's really all you need. And most of your medicinal plants are in your kitchen. So for home health, sage, rosemary, thyme, turmeric, ginger, cinnamon, oregano.
onion and garlic.
Yeah, and I just should tell you this, onion, garlic, cabbage, that's on herb. But I should let you know this, this is a really interesting thing. So we think of these culinary herbs, and our tongues are really, familiar with the taste of basil in Italian food, of basil and tomato, and ginger with Asian food, etc. But these medicinal plants were added not because they taste good, right? If you just taste a lot of them, some of them do taste good, but most of them are bitter or hot or spicy. They were added by our ancestors because they either help with the digestion, they had medicinal uses, like all the herbs that are used in Indian cooking were used in there because they fought infection. So they were brought into the kitchen not so much because of flavor, but because of their medicinal uses. So you have an herbal apothecary right in your kitchen. So if you cook, you are already a practicing herbalist. You are already using herbs and using them medicinally, whether you know it or not. So how are these? Yeah, you can't put the lid on until they cool. You pour them into the container, and we're gonna just pray that they're hard enough. I sort of.
I think I got hardened, so.
Oh yeah, really hard.
Some of them aren't as pretty as others because it's starting to harden at the end, sorry.
We don't. So this would be a good all-purpose salve. So I want to just share this with you too. When you get done making salves and oils and ointments, after we scrape this, our pan is really oily. It's kind of hard to wash out. If you have a dishwasher, that really helps. If not, you want to use like a newspaper or paper towel or a rag, and you wipe out the oils first before you try washing. That's the simple trick. Just wash them, wipe them out before you try washing. It makes it really easy. Oh, and I forgot to add the essential oil. Darn, I wanted to add your little essential oil. So we could do this. We could take the lavender and just go in and just add just a pinch. Is it already hardened?
Yeah.
Oh, never mind. Sorry. Okay, well, yours is not gonna smell nice. It's just gonna be a nice healing salve, all-purpose salve. If I was doing this right, I would have a little label. If you want to remember, your salve is it all-purpose or burn salve? It has comfrey, yarrow, calendula.
To be aware of new videos like this one, be sure to subscribe to the Preparing for the Time of Trouble channel. For more free videos and downloadable audio podcasts, as well as handouts, go to www.preparingforthetimeoftrouble.com. Topic categories include recordings of live seminar presentations, country living, sustainable gardening, homestead remedies, how to be self-sufficient when the grid goes down, wild edible and medicinal plants, hydrotherapy, and end-time Bible prophecies. To take advantage of these free resources, go to preparingforthetimeoftrouble.com.